So, guys, got some great news today.
Yeah, me too, man. I can't wait to share with you
Yeah, yeah,
guys.
yeah. What's up, guys? Me too. All right, so
All right,
so
all right,
oh,
all right. Let's all say it at the same time, then,
all
just to
right.
make it fair. Okay, ready?
Okay.
One, two, three.
All
Hey,
right,
I came in.
I got my book. My revised
This
book
was
came
awesome.
in. Dean, where's your book?
Oh, I was just gonna say I got confirmation that mine shipped.
Oh, oh, sorry. Oh, but at least you got that PDF still. So let's talk about the book some more. Hey, yo, it's your boy Ancient Albatross here again with the Cypher Unlimited crew. We have our usual suspects of Alpha Dean or AD or just Dean. We have Spigs18 or Anthony. And Dean, why are we here today?
Well, guys, you know what? We're back. Part two of our in-depth review of the new revised edition of the Cypher System Rulebook, and we handled part one and two, or should I say, part one last time, which dealt with character creation and all that goodness, plus the introduction. And today we're going to look at parts two and three of the revised Cypher System Rulebook. Section two covers the rules of the game, experience points and mechanics and all of that. And section three is all about the different settings or genres offered in this book. It talks about as well as creating and adapting your own. So that's the fun of it. Anthony, give us a little idea on the format or whatever else is going on over here.
Yeah, for those of you that do not know what Cypher System is, this video is a basic walkthrough of the revised edition of the core rulebook, or AKA our gaming Bible. So, Monica Games is Cypher System is a Monica Games product, a universal role-playing system. It powers Numenera, The Strange, Predation, Gods of the Fall, Mass, so four more original settings that are coming out soon. And like we said in the first video, we're not necessarily going to go over in detail all the rules and mechanics of the game, but more our opinions and the differences between the revised edition and the older original Cypher System core book.
Yeah. And not only that, we like I said last time, this full disclosure, we did receive advanced copies of the book from Monty Good Games for our to review it. But we did back it. We are, as you see, we have our books. We are backers, and Dean Taz is on the way. But we are again discussing our opinions on it, and how we feel about the changes between the old book and this book. Yeah, it didn't, us getting that review copy has not swayed our opinion on the subject at hand. We just genuinely love it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Dean.
All right. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna jump right into the rules of the game, and basically we're gonna talk about, an overview of basic mechanics and the implementation of the rules themselves. So,
uh, what chapter is it and what page is it,
oh,
Dean?
that's chapter 11, and it starts on page 206. For those of you in the PDF, that'll be page 208.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
well, well, basic. I was just gonna start off by talking about some of the basic terminology in the game. Um, there's going to be eased, hindered, inability, tasks being practiced or specialized in skills, um, task difficulty, um, intrusions, edge, and effort. And I think that's about it for
Yeah.
the basic terminology. And we'll just kind of get into it, Al.
I mean, yeah, it discusses all the basic like knowledge or things that you need to know to play or run the system. Again, we're not gonna go super in depth because we're going over the whole what it covers. Well, these two chapters or sections that we're covering. There's a lot to go into, so us going into detail on these matters. If you want to hear about it, if you don't know about Cypher System, let us know. We'll make a video for it. But yeah, it goes over like what the different roles mean, like when you roll a one, or there are special roles involved when you roll on D20, no matter what you're doing. On natural one, you get a GM intrusion, which is talked about in depth in this. You get examples of GM intrusions. These are automatic. The players cannot refuse them. It allows the GM to alter the situation at hand. But on the flip side of that, there are benefits for the player when they roll a 17, 18, 19, or 20. 17 or 18 are only beneficial when you're in combat. You do a little bit of extra damage. You get +1 damage on 17, +2 on 18. And 19 and 20 is where it gets really juicy. Is when you get your 19, you get your minor effects, or 20, you get a major effect. And again, they give you some examples of these things. And yeah, it's the real meat of the system.
Yeah, I think for those of you that have the original Cypher system book, I think this is pretty much on par. It's almost, the rules, the core rules of the game haven't really changed any at all, if at all. So it's basically, I think the first chapter 11 of this book is pretty much the same as the original book. It goes over, it explains, like pretty much what Al said. It explains what effort edge is, explains what intrusions are, it explains all the terminology. It gives you a basic, like a general explanation of what a role-playing game is and how to, run a table. So it's pretty much the same stuff. I think they just maybe had one or two minor changes, but the first few pages of running the game is the same as the original version.
Yep.
Right. And just as a quick reminder, or should we say refresher, and also, that for those of you who've never played Cypher System, the basic mechanic in the game is a difficulty number is established between 1 and 10. In most cases, that number is multiplied by 3, and that's the target number you need to hit on your D20. Um, we talked about being, trained or specialized, those affect those die rolls as well, or should I say those difficulties. Inabilities affect them, all that type of stuff. This is all standard um, fodder of the game. This is the good stuff. It's one of the things that makes the game flow and move the way it does.
So since you said that, we'll go in a little deeper. Like something like an inability would make the task more difficult. Something like being practiced or specialized in a task will actually improve your chances. So it would lower the difficulty number, so you have a better chance of succeeding.
Yep. So, and if you're using the terms of the game, that is called being eased if it's becoming easier, or being hindered if it's becoming more difficult.
Right.
And one thing that Monica Games did in the first version, and actually Monica Games does in all their game books, is they always give you nice little charts, to explain it. So like what we're talking about now, difficulty tasks. They actually have a chart that goes from 0 to 10, and it does the math for you, and it explains, like a 0 roll, it's a routine roll, all the way to impossible, which would be a 10, and that's needing a 30 on a D20, which is very difficult to do unless you have some help.
Yes.
Correct.
But there's also,
and that goes for everything.
Yeah, and within the section, there's also a lot of like little tidbits and optional rules that help, with running other portions or like aspects of your game, such as like using vehicles or vehicular combat. There's the player versus player combat, dealing with area attacks, attacking objects. And there's a lot of optional rules in there as well, such as like gaining insight, getting EXP advances, followers, skills from backgrounds, using minis. It touches on all these little aspects. So if you had those thoughts in your mind, they kind of put it on the paper there for you to like get ideas for them.
Can we talk about player versus player combat? Because that's a conversation that happens a lot on our server. And there's this misconception that it can't be done in Cypher System, which is a misconception.
It most definitely is.
It most definitely.
Yeah. So, I can touch on that a little bit actually with a first-hand anecdote of a story, right? So I started running Cypher System for my coworkers. This is their first time ever playing role-playing games together. Two of them, there's 3 coworkers. 2 of them have never played role-playing games before. One of them has experience with Dungeons and Dragons. So we're playing, right? And throughout the whole course of the game, like, they're role-playing their characters excellently, like, to the T, like, everything's going swimmingly. It's awesome, right? But in this game, I've never had so many PvP rolls in a single game ever. Like, ever. But it was never them actually like fighting or having combat with one another. It was always the morals or their objectives conflicting with one another. So, for example, the rogue would want to rush off and say, "Hey, there's a shiny thing. I want to take that." And the paladin would be like, "Hey, wait a second. No, no, no. We can't be just running around taking things." So in that situation, there's a PvP role. It's not combat based. They're not saying, "Hey, I'm going to fight you over this." It's like whose morals or who's being stubborn the most, like, and who outwins it. So in this case, the paladin goes to try to stop the rogue, and the rogue can either dodge out of the way or be stopped by the paladin, and that's where it becomes a PvP role. And again, it flowed with the story. It kept the narrative like going well because I saw these interactions between the characters, and again, it took away nothing from the game, and it flowed.
And I'd just like to add to.
I was just going to touch on the actual mechanics of a PvP role.
Oh, yeah.
What someone would do in a situation where two players, similar to, we'll use our story as an example. Someone wants to take something, someone wants to stop them from taking it. They will both roll a d20 and add whatever skills apply to the roll or whatever apply effort as normal, like with the same way they would if they were rolling to a target number. But instead of lowering the target number, they add 3 for each asset they add to the roll. Both players roll as a contested roll, so if someone applies effort, one level of effort, and has a skill in, say in the rogue, he has a skill in thievery, which gives him 3 to the roll. He would add 6 on his d20 roll. He or she would add 6 on his d20 roll, and the person trying to stop them will also roll a d20 and add whatever skills or effort they want to apply to the roll, and it's a head-to-head roll. It's simple as that. It's very simple, actually.
Yeah, and again, it doesn't have to be combat. It's never like sometimes it might come down to them trading blows, and again, the same rules apply. You have them roll it out, but in either case, if it fits the narrative, there's no problem with it.
And that's really the biggest thing. The point I was going to touch upon was just that Cypher system, in no way you cannot have player versus player. It just kind of encourages cooperation. You're really trying to tell a grand story. But now again, if that PvP actually adds to the story or would be integral to the narrative, let it happen. Just like Al was saying, let it happen. Figure out the contested roles and go for it. Again, Cypher system is very simple in its mechanics. It's just very elegant in its application.
Yes.
You can apply it in so many varying ways to get the results you're looking for.
And you'll be surprised if when you allow these things to happen, some of the most memorable moments in that game were some of these like PvP roles. There was actually a PvP role where the rogue was trying to steal a scroll from the paladin who had just found it, right, without him knowing. So they're setting it up. Hey, I want to steal without him knowing. Hey, he's not. I'm going to catch him. Paladin rolls first, rolls a 20. He has no bonuses, right? He rolls a natural 20, and the rogue has a bonus, a +3, because he has a thief. I forget what it was. I was like, the only way you actually take it is you roll a natural 20, because you have the bonus. He rolls it, boom, natural 20. So he takes the scroll, and Paladin's none the wiser. And it was very memorable. And again, it's fun. It's just don't shy away from the situation because it seems awkward because you're pitting two players against one another. Because really, it adds to the flavor of the narrative if it's done well.
Yeah. And the other thing that you can think about too, just thinking about what we were talking earlier, that flexibility in not changing the dynamics of how the game works, even using that 17 or 18 in those situations. Give the person a +1 bonus or a +1, +2 bonus to whatever action that's going on. If it's a social situation, it doesn't only have to be for combat and damage. You can always just be a little, because it's not going to change the game itself. It's not going to change the dynamics or how things flow.
I mean, you could even say the same thing for the 19 and 20, the minor and major effects.
Right.
Like I think the most enjoyable minor and major effects are the ones that have nothing to do with combat.
Yes.
Oh yeah,
fully agreed.
I forgot what game it was. It might have been one of our Halloween game where someone had a major effect and they chose to have their major effect be that the innocent bystanders were able to escape and move away from where everyone was fighting. It didn't give them an advantage whatsoever, but it added so much to the scene.
Yes. I
Right.
mean, I don't. That doesn't sound like a game I was in, unless my memory is just terrible. But yes, that is an excellent example of.
But yeah, I mean, and I think I may have been in that game, and I think the way it was described, it was like the person, and that was what it was. It was a very beautiful narrative moment. Because
Yeah.
remember, if I remember
It
correctly,
was the movie. It was the movie theater superhero game. I forgot what.
yeah, and
I
basically,
ran into it. I forgot
yeah,
what it was.
it was your
Sky High.
Sky High.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it was like, the hero moved himself into a position, to give the civilians cover.
Yeah.
So,
And I gave him time to escape.
right, and so those things like that, those are those scenes that you can describe as the slow motion scene or whatever.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Other things that go on in this rules section is they talk about distance and timekeeping, how initiative works, um, different types of damage. Of course, there's typical I'm beating on you damage. I'm shooting you with my gun, whatever, using my superpowers. But then there's also ambient damage and stuff like that, from the environment that comes into play.
It also explains the damage track.
Right.
Hailed, impaired, debilitated, and dead.
Dead.
Exactly.
You are dead. Period.
Once again, we're not going to go through if you want us to go through in-depth explanation of the rules, we could do that as well. But like I said earlier, it's very similar or almost exactly
like
the same as the original book, or Numenera, or the Strange. There's very little differences.
And of course, that final section is the optional rules as
yes.
well. Gaining insight, getting XP advances, follower skills from backgrounds, using miniatures, things of that. I mean, it's crazy.
I have a question. Was followers in the original Cypher book?
I can look right quick.
I'm actually not 100% sure myself.
I'm not sure if it was there either, but
that might have came from Discovery and Destiny. Same thing with and if we're gonna go back, they might have changed the crafting rules and took the crafting rules from Discovery and Destiny and added it into the revised edition as well.
So you were just asking me about which skills?
Followers. I have the PDF right here.
I'm looking at it right now. No, I don't see. Nope. But I don't see followers.
Very useful stuff and new stuff in this section. It's not just the old stuff. So
followers and also
the crafting
using miniatures. I don't see that.
Using miniatures.
No, that was definitely mentioned before.
I mean, I don't use miniatures, but
it's definitely
that's because you glossed over it because you rarely use it.
Oh, it's there, yeah. But you know what? After reading it, and like I said, because we're doing this review, I'm looking at other things that I didn't look at before, and it's kind of funny. It wouldn't take away one little bit from Cypher System if you wanted to put things on a grid. Actually, it would be kind of cool because I think it would have. I think in the sense it's so cinematic in the first place, by putting those miniatures down, it'll just add to the effect of the imagination there.
I mean, personally, to be honest, I've never played Cypher System using miniatures, but when I was at Gen Con, I saw a couple of games of Numenera where they were using miniatures, and it looked hella fun. I kind of wanted to jump in.
Well, I used miniatures when I ran the fantasy game at a local convention. Remember I showed you all those minis I had put up for those pictures, and that actually turned out pretty good. They were fighting giants, and it was kind of cool because I was playing with a 13-year-old and a 12-year-old, their dad, and guy, I guess he was in his 20s, but they were all D&D players, so it really stuck with them, which was pretty cool.
And you guys have played in my Predation game, which I also ran earlier for two of my coworkers. And you see, I use not a grid, but the the circle system, which I learned from someone on our server named Tattered King. He a long time ago, I mentioned how how to handle like combat on a map, and he mentioned this method he'd use, and it's really effective. And I first did it on Roll20 when, again, you know, instead of it's basically minis, you know, digital minis. But I did it today in person, and again, I used minis for it, and it ran fine. It was great.
Yeah, I stand corrected. I've never played with miniatures in a Cypher System game
in person.
In person.
But on Roll20 I have, because Jen Kitty, one of our members that plays in a lot of games, she refuses to play without minis. So and she was in the Sky High campaign, so all the big bad fight scenes, I always made sure we had a map.
I'll tell you who else did it, and it worked really well, is when we played in Eric Frankhouse's Mecha game. Remember how we did it?
I'm still mad I didn't get to play in that.
That was very fun.
Oh man, that was brilliant.
Get him to run it. Let's get him to run it. He'll definitely run it for us.
Yeah. Thanks for throwing salt in the wound, Dean.
Hey, you guys got Cypher System rule books, and I'm still waiting.
But yeah, I think we hit all the major points for this section.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the most important section if you've never played Cypher System, so we'll say that first and foremost. You know, it's the basic, the guts, the rules of the game. And even if you look at, to show you how beautiful and elegant a system it is, it starts at page 206 and all the rules ends at 236. So It's basically what, 30 pages?
30 pages.
And 30 pages, which allows you to have a universal gaming system that plays pretty much any genre. That's pretty darn good.
I mean, if you really think about that, that's really impressive. 30 pages of rules, 420 pages
of other stuff. Yeah. And on top of that, if you haven't played Cypher System, or if you want to know more about it, we'll link it in the description down below for y'all who are interested.
The rules primer.
Yeah, the rules primer. Yeah, so that's about, I forget how long it is.
17 pages.
It gives you the nuts and bolts of basically this section we just discussed. It tells you all about the key concepts, what the dice rolls mean, all that stuff. It doesn't give you all the optional rules and all that stuff, but you get a little basic sense of how.
I think it just gives the basic rules, and that's kind of the brunt of it, you know.
Exactly.
So the actual rules of the game are probably 17 pages.
Yeah, so we'll add that down below for y'all if y'all interested. And
So right after that, we talk about experience points. Who wants to tell people about experience points?
I'll start it off. First, it's chapter 12. It starts on page 237 if you have the new book. Or is it what, 239
on a PDF?
239 on a PDF.
On a PDF. Experience points, it covers a lot of things. You know, it's what you get when you allow the GM to intrude on the GM intrusion. And what you use these experience points for is multiple reasons. It allows you to re-roll rolls. It allows you to do short-term and long-term effects. You know, a short-term effect, I believe, is 2 XP. A long-term effect, I believe, is 3 XP.
Yep.
Right.
And once again, it's similar almost exactly to any Cypher System game or Numenera the Strange. They all follow the same system.
It really didn't change much, but they did add something. One major change.
They added one major change, which is the character arcs.
Yes.
This book, not only does it explain what a character arc is, but it gives you over 30 examples, maybe 40 examples. And this is hella cool. Like a character arc, granted, it works best for longer campaigns, but it's basically before the game starts, you get to pick like where do you see your character going in 4 or 5 sessions, and it awards you XP for completing these little mini arcs.
You can look at it like your character's motivations.
Yes.
You know,
let's just go over some of them because these are pretty cool. Let me see if I can find. I know Al saw one that he wanted to talk about.
I mean, I didn't particularly want to talk about it. I mean, I wanted to talk about them in general because they're awesome. It's just, there's some really detailed or diverse selections here as far as character arc goes. So you just want to pick a random one and talk about it?
Yeah, just pick a random one.
All right, so repay a debt. So this is your character arc, right? So you owe someone something, and it's time to make good. So each character arc has 4 main aspects to it. There's an opening to it, which is like your opening scene to that goal or whatever have you, your arc. Then there's steps involved, which are like there could be range from anywhere between 1 to 4 steps, depending on how many sessions you're playing. And one shot, odds are you'll have just one step. But if you're playing over multiple sessions for a campaign, you might have 4 or 5 steps involved in reaching the end goal of your character arc, which culminates in a climax, where all the steps you took come together to you get to the climax of that arc. It's just basically a story. If you know a story, you know what the climax is, where shit hits the fan. And then after that, you get resolution. During this whole process, you're in EXP for all those steps completed. So for repay a debt, which is the example in the book, opening, your debts come due. You determine to do what is needed to make good on your debt. It might involve repaying money, but more appropriately is performing a deed or series of deeds to repay this debt. So again, some of your steps might involve performing these little tasks to repay that debt over the course of time, and those would be your steps. So let's say you pay. Go ahead.
I was gonna say each step awards you 2 XP. So it's actually better if you pick a character arc that has multiple steps, because it's more XP you gain over the course of your character arc.
Yeah.
Right. And like I said, and the cool part about it is if you finish one character arc and you guys are still playing, you can pick another.
Yes, and when you at the climax, the ending of your character arc, you get 4 XP, and then there's a wrap up, the resolution, like Al said. Once you totally finish, you finish the climax, you reach the point of what, you feel the arc needs to be fully completed, you get an additional 1 XP. The reason why I love this concept is, one, it gives the player something to strive for during a long campaign. But more importantly, it gives the GM so many plot hooks that, if you have a 4-person campaign and they all have 4 different arcs, it gives you so many ideas to run with.
Yep.
Right. It gives you. Go ahead, Al.
No, I was just gonna say, and on top of that, it helps with. I know it's a skill you learn while you're GMing, but it kind of helps you with that spotlight. Moving around, because now you have a bunch of different scenes you could focus on for each of the characters. Like, hey, this one character hasn't seen Spotlight in a while, boom, they can work on their character arc on this step or whatever have you. And now there we go. Now they have a spotlight scene basically at the ready for you.
And here's another thing that I like about it, in concept, because dealing with different players, different people, you encounter those people who have this thing about how XP is used. You got people who hoard XP and don't use it for rerolls or anything like that, and they don't use it for short-term or long-term effects. They just want to use it for character advancement. Well, yes. Some people, so some GMs do come up with the concept and say, okay, everything earned during the game is in-game XP, and that's what it's used for, and then everything that you get at the end of every session is for character advancement. Well, this also could be just like a whole pool that you always pull from for character advancement, just an addition for people to to say, what, these points are always going to be spent on advancement, since this is my story arc, this is my character's, this is my character's, hero's journey. So that's a concept. And again, this is the beauty of Cypher System, because within its own rules, it inspires you to expand on what's already there, never changing anything, never changing the concept. It's not like house ruling any other game I've ever played, because I'm never really changing the dynamics or the mechanics or the reasoning behind something going on.
Yep.
So
I just want to talk about this specific character arc, because it basically boils down to why Cypher System is so awesome. It isn't like, these character arcs don't have to be combat focused. It could be just general life survival focus. And birth is the one I want to talk about. Your opening scene for the birth is that impregnation. Either you or your significant other, spouse, whatever, what have you, is impregnated, right? The first step is finding a caretaker. How awesome is that? You're an adventurer. It doesn't matter what genre you're playing. That's a problem that almost anyone would have if they had a child, right? And then the following step is the complication arises that threatens the pregnancy or the birth or the birth parent or both. Like these are so many plot hooks and C's that it gives the GM to add complications to the narrative. I just love this. And then it further goes on to the climax is the actual delivery of this child. So, this could be an arc that lasts 9 months in gameplay.
Right.
This is.
And like you said, everybody kind of picking one that they like. See, personally, like how you were talking about that impregnation, birth, awesome. Mine, what I was looking at is growth, because it's what I think it's what every gamer kind of looks for in their character, is to see the growth of the character. And that's what it's saying. The beginning change usually begins slowly in small, almost imperceptible ways, but and the growth involves many small steps, then finally overcoming the obstacles in the climax, self-evident change. So that kind of gives you the thrust to like literally take your character on a true journey. So maybe you start out as this selfish, self-centered, self-serving, maniacal individual. Only by the end of it all, you're Mr. Altruistic, or vice versa.
I saw growth, and I thought about, hey, you have a really shy person at the table, and you give them this character arc,
exactly,
and they don't know it, but the story's kind of centered around their character.
Right. That's awesome.
Yeah,
and that's what I'm saying. See, another concept from the same character arc, two different GMs get two different thought processes to approach it. And that's what makes it awesome, because it's not just a single approach to any character arc either. That's a lot to be said.
Yeah. So character arcs definitely.
I was just gonna say, and there's a hell of a lot of character arcs.
Yeah, I'm just like scrolling through them right now. There's a ton, but it's definitely, it adds a lot of We said already, like those scenes, those vital scenes, like you're struggling. Like I know as a GM, I sometimes not struggle, but like what can I include in the story? Like what can we do next? And these just perfectly set it up for you. Like, oh hey, we can now work on this guy's step. He'll have the spotlight for this like whatever session or whatever, and the next session, boom, we're on to the next character arc or whatever have you.
And you know something? It's just funny. I just had a kind of a revelation too. We could actually still include character arcs in one shots.
Yeah,
just
definitely.
on a smaller scale.
Yeah, just have one step involved.
Just like one step. Just have one step involved. Have it on a smaller scale, or it's just like
it's still applicable. Definitely applicable for one shots. There's no denying that. It's awesome. It's just so good.
Yeah, I also want to put this out there because this is another conversation that happens a lot on the server. There is no right way or wrong way of spending XP.
Yes.
Right. Absolutely not.
And there's also no right or wrong way on how to divide it, whether you keep your story EXP separate from your character advancements.
Yeah. Right.
There's literally no right or wrong way. There's only the book is a guide. It gives you examples on how to do it. It tells you may separate them. You don't have to. It tells them you may decide to do. I actually don't know if this is a point in the book. I feel like I read it in the first book. But even if you want to do like milestone advancements, where at the end of the session they just get one advancement and that they don't have to worry about EXP for advancement, and then all the EXP earned in the game is just for the game, where they use it for the long term, the short term benefits, the rerolls, all that stuff. Personally, that's how I do it. But again, there's no right or wrong way to do this.
I will say this. I don't know many people, or me personally, I might have used it maybe 2 or 3 times, and I've played a ton of Cypher System for short and long-term effects. I either use them for rerolls or advancement, but I rarely use long-term effects, the 3 XP and 2 XP. And I got to make a conscious effort to try using that more.
I definitely encourage my players, and again, this I'm not sure if this is in the book. Again, this is me speaking my opinion on how I run things.
Yeah.
For like 2 EXP and 3 EXP, the book says again short-term, long-term advancements, or benefits. But I also take it in that, hey, you want to do something that's kind of cool, or like the player intrusion type deal, where you spend 1 EXP to do a player intrusion. Hey, you have a slightly crazier idea. You want to offer me 2 EXP to do it? Hey, go crazy. You want to do something extremely crazy? Give me 3, 4 EXP to do it? Go for it. For example, in my game earlier today, the Predation game, you guys all know there's that one scene. Sorry, spoilers alerts for anyone who hasn't played it. But the guy who tricks them, takes a companion and runs off right in the portal, in the temporal rift, right? So the guy whose companion I decided to take, he had 4 EXP, and he was like, no, I want to give you 4 EXP. I'm fast enough to get to the portal and at least grab the net. The guy's gonna get away, but at least I saved my companion. I was like, for 4 EXP, yeah, give it to me. We'll say that you nullified that. Like, he gave me 4 EXP to change the narrative, and it's a one shot too. It's a one shot.
I'm just gonna say this, yo, you took way too much EXP.
No, he offered it. He offered 4. He offered 4, and it's a one shot. So he just, and again, even if he had offered me
EXP, that portal better be crumbling down. That's a lot of EXP. That's a whole.
For I honestly would have accepted probably 3 for it, but he offered it, and I just wanted to keep it rolling. I didn't want to go back and forth, and so I say, hey, yeah, give me the 4 EXP. We're gonna say, hey, that happened. But again, in the same situation, you could say, hey, 3 EXP. You could haggle with the GM if you want to, but we were short on time. You had to go to work, so I didn't want to make it.
Right, and that's I think the difference with me. Like, most of the time when it comes to experience points, I'm not one of those people. I'm not one of those GMs that separate anything for people. I give them suggestions, and offer them, the idea, as far as short-term effects. I've had it happen a couple of times in a couple of longer running games. I actually had a long-term effect where a guy, he was a scientist. He was basically Tony Stark, this crazy engineer, and he spent 3 EXP to turn his Cypher into a longer term functioning, ability. Basically he jury rigged his Cypher. It's supposed to give him, enhanced optics for like 24 hours or something, but he jury rigged it, where, he could make a depletion roll every day.
So he basically turned it into an artifact.
Right. For a short term.
Yeah.
Though. It was like, every day, and it was only like a D20 roll. And if you, and every day it amped up how it, we worked it out, but every day it was, the depletion roll increased by 1. So it started at 1, then it was 2, then it was 3, and, by the time, so eventually it was going to fail regardless. But it was a cool way to get around, how long it was, he was like happy. He's like, look, if I get an extra day, I'm happy. If I get, a week, great, but little stuff like that. So, personally, I think XP being multifunctional is an awesome aspect of Cypher System.
Maybe we should just backtrack a little and define short-term and long-term effects.
Yeah.
Like a short-term effect would be a narrowly focused skill, like say something like, I know how to write shorthand.
Right.
It wouldn't necessarily, it might help in one particular scene in the entire campaign, but you now have this permanent skill that I know how to write shorthand. A long-term effect would be something like, I own a boat.
Yeah, or establishing a trade route or something with like a friendly
things
group
like that,
or something like that, and it's something that benefits you during the entirety of the campaign. Basically, it's something you can fall back on. It's like, hey, we're lacking this item. I have a trade route with these people. Hey, they can trade us for that item, maybe, or maybe you.
Matter of fact, that happened in one of the games we played. The guys actually spent 3 EXP to basically. He had basically inherited one of his. He didn't inherit. He was able to procure one of his rich father's, spacecraft. Just a small little ship for them to get around in. So, why not give him 3 XP? I'll give you. It didn't have any weapons in it or anything, special. It was just something for them to travel in.
Yeah, I just think as a player, I want to utilize that. Those are rules more.
They're fun.
I don't feel like I don't utilize it enough as a player, and I'm gonna make a conscious effort to do that, especially like the long-term effects.
Well, one thing we need to do, guys, because we are the kings of one-shots, we should establish at least I've been trying to get some story arcs in, 4 or 5 sessions long, but let's make a conscious effort to try to get some stuff out there like that for our players and
absolutely.
Most definitely.
So I think we've exhausted EXP.
Yep.
I mean,
So
we
now
was one thing we didn't mention, which is something very, you know, if you're using EXP for advancement, it costs 4 EXP to pick an advancement,
all right,
and you can pick 4 of the 5 advancements before you tier up. So it
correct.
essentially costs 4. Oh, excuse me, costs 12 EXP to tier up to the next.
16.
Or yeah, sorry, my math is terrible.
Yeah.
16 EXP. 4 times
And
4 is 16.
mind you, you have to pick 4
Different ones, yes.
Yes.
different ones. There are 5 listed, plus there's other things you can discuss with the GM.
Yes.
You know, and your GM will go over those optional ideas of what to expend to tier up. So, you know, tiering up is you know what, you as a GM have a little bit of control, but the players have a lot of control over it as well.
Yes.
Because, you know, you can increase your effort, you know, and then you know, hey, you know what, I want to get this one. So it's a lot of fun there, you know.
But yeah, I just wanted to end on that because we didn't touch on it at all.
Yeah, I mean that's it's excellent because that's exactly how you advance in this game
Yes.
if you're playing in a campaign and you could get all the way to tier 6.
Yep.
Right.
Is by saving your XP to level up.
You could get there quicker, you know. And real quick, once again, the disclaimer that we've said 1,000 times, but everybody should once again understand that just because your character is advancing slower than other people in the party because you're using your XP in game does not take your character's effectiveness away. You know, the other people just get more stuff, you know, if you will. But, you know, it's still that resource management, is still looking at your character, you know, through your own lens and truly enjoying it, you know, and that's
You know, that made me want to say this too. As a player, please, players, don't deny so many intrusions.
Oh yeah.
That's how you get XP.
Accept
Not
them,
only,
yes.
not only are you losing the XP by denying intrusion, let the GM change the narrative. It's gonna be more fun. Trust me.
Right.
Take that free XP and hoard it, save it, spend it, do what you want with it. But allow those intrusions to flow freely.
And not only that, it is not just 1 E, it's 2 EXP you're losing out on there because so you get to give 1 to someone else.
right.
Yeah.
And
You put that
there's
EXP
2
in
EXP
somebody
just
else's
out the
pocket.
window.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you put-
exactly.
So I guess the last thing to say about that whole concept of tiering up character levels and all that kind of stuff, or character tiers, just think of it this way. You know, just about everybody out there has probably seen the Avengers, at least one Avengers movie. Those characters are not all the same tier characters.
Oh yeah.
By no means. You know, Captain America, his journey, you know, by Endgame, Captain America is a tier 6 character compared to, you know, Black Widow, who may have in her journey only be a tier 3, but still quite effective. You know, or you compare her to Thor or, you know, whoever. So these are those beautiful aspects of it. And now we're going to shut up about XP. You know, that was chapter 2, or should I say part 2, chapters 11 and 12, rules of the game and experience points. Now we're going to move on to the meaty portion of this particular discussion, and that's the genres or the settings, you know, the different places you get to take the game. I'm going to say this about the new revised book. They now put 9 genres in the book as opposed to 5.
Well, before you go on your tangent, genres start on page 251, 253 in the PDF. Yeah, it's like Dean said, there's a lot. There's 9 in this book, and yeah, I didn't mean to cut you off, but yeah, I just wanted people to know what page we're on and such.
Right.
But yeah, it starts off with fantasy, which is again, I believe it starts off with that because it's one of the most common things that you see in tabletop role playing games. That fantasy setting, people love it. It's a tried and true setting for a reason. It has wonderful tropes and all that stuff. So yeah, just like with every genre in the book, it gives a lot of suggestions on running a fantasy game, some optional rules. You know, species are popular in that sort of setting, so it gives a lot of descriptors for those, like dwarves, elf.
Actually, don't gloss over that because they actually added 2 additional.
Oh.
In the original book, they only gave you dwarf and elf, I believe, and now you have half giants and hellborn, and
Right.
I mean, I'm not a big fan of species as descriptors. I said it before in other videos, but it still gives you the option of using, having a descriptor as your race or class.
I look at it and see, for me, kind of in the sense, especially with fantasy games, depending on the type of fantasy game I want to run, I'll go ahead and throw, you know, species as a descriptor in, only because, once again, I'll actually give you the extra descriptor as your race, as opposed to,
Yeah, that's what I mean. I
you
usually
know,
just do two descriptors.
right. I'll just give you two.
Yeah.
I'm not one of those people who think, it's overpowered or anything, because as a GM, look, you're in control. And the only thing that you're doing when you give players stuff is you're giving yourself more stuff to work with.
Well, hold on. Let me look at the descriptor of half giant to see if it's OP.
It probably
I'm-
isn't. I
I
assume
was-
there's some.
Yeah, I doubt it will be, but let's see.
I'm going to it right now. I'm looking at it right now. You get +4 to your might. You inflict 1 point of damage with your melee. 1 point more damage with melee weapons and attacks with thrown weapons. Tasks related to breaking things and smashing them are eased. You have an inability. You're too large to accomplish normal things. Tasks related to initiative, stealth, fine manipulation of any sort, such as lockpicking and repair tasks, are hindered. So, I don't see how that's breaking the game in any way.
No, I agree, but you see, like, if you could have removed the +4 to might, like, let them pick whatever they want, because I'm not a big fan of races only do one thing well.
Oh, I fully agree with that.
Like,
honestly.
I don't like. How about if I wanted to play the half giant rogue?
Or like the half giant scholar or whatever.
Well,
You know.
But even still, even with that, I could see that happening. But,
No, I mean I can too. I'm just
No,
saying that.
what I was saying,
like, it's
I'm-
like stereotyping. It's the same problem. It's the same problem I have with D&D. You know what I mean?
Well, let me give you an example of why it kind of works for me. There's a few books that I've read, especially there was a series of books called The New Adventures. They were Star Trek books, and they dealt with Captain Mackenzie Calhoun. And he had a guy on his ship, an alien on his ship, who comes from a race of, strong, typical strong, typical exactly what they were. Mm-hmm. They are stronger than humans. It is just their nature. But this guy was what you said. He was like, the centered philosophical scholar, even though he was the head of security. It was so cool because it was those aspects. So, I don't mind him having the +4 to might. I would say, okay, you know what? If you want to play that character, take +2 to might, so you're still stronger than a normal human, and put +2 in your intellect.
No. What I'm saying is instead of giving them 2 full descriptors, just give them massive strength, the 1 point, and the breaker skill, right, as like a semi descriptor, and allow them to pick another descriptor as normal. Yeah. Right, and do that like how I did with the mice. You know what I mean? Just give them an additional ability, but not give them an entirely 2 full descriptors, because once again, like, it's not game. It's pretty much what you said. It's not game breaking in any way, but I'm just not a fan of, like, I don't know how to say it, but
you're not a fan of the typical tropes.
Yeah, like you're forced to have a.
And here's the thing, though.
And that's not just Cypher System. That's pretty much in all fantasy.
But that's what I'm saying, and again, that's the beauty of Cypher System. You're the GM. You can fix that rule without breaking any aspect of the game.
Yep.
Me, like I said, I'll do double descriptors because a lot of respects, sometimes I'm just being lazy. That's my lazy coming through. Oh, yeah, go take 2 descriptors. I don't care. Get all the benefits, all the inabilities. I don't care. That's game.
Essentially, you can say, like, the way you kind of not circumvent, but the way you should approach it really is, well, ideally would be, hey, I want to be a hill giant, right, or a half giant. And you say, hey, whatever, you get +2 might, whatever have you. It's just because you're just a big guy or whatever. Mm-hmm. But you can say, "Hey, I'm a half giant scholar," and you're like that scholar, which is what Anthony was saying, becomes your like actual descriptor. Like you get the intelligence, you get the whatever have you. You still look like a half giant. You're still a big guy. You still have the little bonuses or whatever. But
Yeah,
it's
the
more,
extra-
it's more focused on your vocation or whatever your
Right.
upbringing than
Absolutely.
your stereotypical body or whatever.
Right. Oh, I agree. I agree with you 100%. You know, um,
This conversation turned into the ethics of being a half giant.
no,
But
you know, it's just funny. I mean, just like I said, from books I've read, and then even watching, you know, I don't know if you guys have watched it yet, but the new Dark Crystal, you know, they,
I've only seen half of it. I have to watch the rest.
but that was kind of cool where they had the Gelflings, but they had 7 different clans of Gelfling, and they all had different inherent, you know, specialties. So again, another way to approach the situation without quote unquote following the typical trope.
Yeah, it reminds me of like the old Ari Salvador books, the not the Dritz books, but the Cleric Quintet
Mm-hmm.
books. You know, the Cataly, and you know
Right.
he had the two. One dwarf was a cleric,
Right.
and you know he didn't know anything about stone cutting or anything. I forgot what his name was,
Right.
but you know he was a cleric of a human god. You know what I mean?
Exactly. So
um,
yeah, you can change the focus, change the tropes, and just you know run with it. You
I
know,
mean, I think this is the. I think they also added the optional spellcasting rule.
oh,
yes,
it's
they did.
awesome.
Yeah,
So
which is pretty cool.
yeah, it's. I mean, if we went into it super in depth, might take a whole video. But essentially, what it boils down to is you can use. You know, we talked about long term benefits. You use one of your long term benefits of 3 EXP to essentially purchase a spell. And you purchase an ability, you discuss it with your GM. It's I believe in the book it says you buy a low tier ability, which they're grouped as in the book as low tier, mid tier, high tier, whatever. So you spend 3 EXP to learn this low tier ability, but it's not really a spell you can cast without great effort on your body or whatever. So to actually cast it, you have to spend one of your recovery rolls. Like, hey, here's one of my recovery rolls for today. I'm casting the spell that I like. I just happen to learn. Like with your 3 EXP, you also have to come with a good reason as to how you learned this spell.
Right.
Maybe you found a book outside and you learned, like you read the spell and you like it kind of embedded in your mind, or maybe you found a wandering mage who was selling like lessons or something, and that's how you learn the spell. But you don't really, it's not really a prepared spell, quote unquote. So it costs like it's a great like cost to your body and mind to actually cast it.
Yeah,
And
that's pretty
it's
awesome.
really cool.
It reminds me, you know, again, you know, examples that you can pull from books or movies. It reminds me of Crow. Remember,
Yeah,
you know, at the end of Crow, you know, the glaive it got embedded, it wasn't working, so he had to combine with the girl next to him, and they pulled up the flame, you know, basically powered by their love and burned it, you know. So it was kind of cool. I could kind of see that being one of those tropes.
you know what's funny? Like 2 weeks ago, I was cleaning out my closet and I found my Crow laser disc. You remember laser disc?
Yes. Oh my god.
Oh my god! I mean,
And I was like, oh, this movie! I wish I had a laser disc player to watch this. This is awesome.
but yeah, you know, as this goes for every other genre section as well. But again, they give you examples of suggested foci for the genre, like what might work well that's in the book. But again, that's not your limits to what you can use. It's just their suggestions. Same thing goes for creatures and NPCs. They give you ideas on what you can use as far as that goes. And that, again, it goes for every genre. They give you examples of these things to play those
And I think
genres.
that's awesome that they do it for every genre.
In every genre, they also give you like examples of artifacts for that
Yes.
particular type of genre. They also talk about mixing genres. They talk about a lot of mixing the genre with sci-fi, but that's
I mean, I think that's the most commonly mixed
right.
mashup
But,
is sci-fi with another genre.
So yeah, so that's always that's going to be in all the genres too. So we're probably going to touch on those as well a little bit.
Before we move from fantasy, I just would say this is going to be a reoccurring theme, but optional rules that they give you for each individual genre doesn't mean that, like how I'll just explain the additional optional spell casting rule. That doesn't mean that it can only be played in fantasy. I could see that being used in several of these genres we're about to talk about.
Right,
Yep.
because you can just because it doesn't have to be magic. It could be psionics. It could be,
Yeah.
it could be devotionals. Whatever. So don't get caught
It
up
could be
on
gadgets and
right.
supers.
Don't get caught up on the basis of the terminology. Remember, this is the way you adapt whatever it is you're trying to do with Cypher System.
Damn, that just you just mentioning supers gave me like a really cool idea, just like flashing in my head. Like you spend 3 XP, you say, "Hey, I found this mysterious artifact from someplace," and like you absorb the power and that's how you get it. Like, and again, it sparks the imagination.
No,
like,
I'll give you the perfect
it's
example
awesome.
with supers. You ever watch the Joker in the cartoons? How he'll have that flower that shoots acid or paint or something, blind someone, but for some reason, every time Batman grabs him, it doesn't work.
Exactly.
You know, it's the perfect one that he didn't have any recovery rolls left.
To use.
Yeah, he used up all his juice. His automatic depletion when Batman is there.
But yeah, it's just there's so many different ways to use all these things, so don't limit your scope to just the section it's listed under.
Yeah.
All right. And so we're gonna move on to modern, and I would say modern begins where fantasy began on 252. Modern begins on 261. Modern had a massive kind of overhaul because before I think it was only a few pages, and this one is like 9 pages.
Yeah.
But they go into a lot of different aspects with the modern age. They talk about running your games, your childhood style games, like if you want to run Stranger Things or stuff like that, where there's a supernatural element or a sci-fi element added into it. But modern games will cover everything. We've had people run the Fast and the Furious, talked about that.
Let's go back to one at a time. You went to the childhood game. Let's talk a little bit about the rules.
Okay. Okay. Well, the childhood games, they break it down between 9 to 13 and then 14 to 17. And they have a table built in where they'll give you examples of like 20 plot hooks to, run the game. It kind of gives you the onus, how it shifts the onus, the idea that in childhood games, how the adults, it gives you functionality of how the adults are going to interact with the kids in the game. Are they going to believe them? Are they just going to continue to try to shelter them? Things of that nature.
Just so you guys get an idea of, you have less points in your pools.
Less points in your might pool. It's just your might pool that they penalize you on.
But it's it kind of shows the being younger and being
more
not
vulnerable.
as more vulnerable, not as hardy or healthy as a full-fledged adult. And let's just keep it real. Young teenager games are really hot right now. Kids on bikes, Tales from the Loop, so it's only logical for them to add this aspect into the new revised core.
Yeah,
what I found interesting is though too that they even mentioned like Harry Potter, and as part of the suggestions for your modern games with a magical flair and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, you're right. It is real cool, and then of course, you got Stranger Things and all of that out there too as well.
And on top of all that, again, just like with every section, there's a list of suggested foci, all that stuff. And they also talk about, again, mixing in with other genres, which we discussed already. But they also include another section for tradecraft, which is like the espionage, like the spy game modern. And again, they include a threat table or a plot hook table.
I really love those threat tables, because it's once again it's like, hey, you want to do a quick short 2-story arc or 3-story arc and say, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we played World War II spies? You could just roll on that table and come up with the first session's story arc.
Right. If you wanted to run James Bond, again, James Bond's got a little like I was saying with the spycraft, crime espionage, all that kind of stuff. It's all right there, for you to build this game, which is pretty cool. I mean, Anthony, you run Scooby Doo. This is
Yeah.
perfect
Yeah,
for
yeah.
Scooby
Yeah.
Doo.
Yep.
You know?
And I will say this too: this modern section, it has probably the most extensive item list of all the
Yeah.
genres in this book, because it's freaking modern. There's you're dealing with several eras, so you had the list is a little longer than normal.
Yeah, but that's
Mm.
definitely helpful. And again, don't think that again it's limited to just this section. If you think these items might work for another kind of game, use them. It's just there for reference. It's not strictly only for modern games. And if you have to reflavor them, reflavor them.
Well, I think Anthony has said it before. When it comes to Cypher System, raw really shouldn't be your focus. Rules
Yeah.
is written because the rules are flexible. I said I love to talk about that article Charles Ryan wrote. The rules, and that was his line. The rules are built for the players. You as a GM, have fun, go crazy with it.
Yeah,
Yep.
I think we touched on modern enough. Any other
Yep.
tidbits to throw in there about modern?
I mean, like I think Al mentioned it. They give you the tips on doing mashups like they do with every other one, and of course they add fantasy to it because modern and fantasy is a good mesh. And then I guess they also add sci-fi to it, which is once again I think sci-fi mashes with meshes up
Everything.
with every genre.
Pretty much. And
Yep.
that brings us to our next one, which is sci-fi.
Yeah.
And yeah, that starts on page 270 in the physical book, so it'd be 272 in the PDF. And again, it touches on all those things that you see in the other sections, like suggested foci, how to create the setting, like what kind of tropes that people look out for, how to run it, the artifacts, ciphers, all those things. And again, it's all suggestions. And they also talk about what is really cool is like examples of spacecrafts, which is something that is essential in most sci-fi, where you have some kind of craft that you fly about and it lists some levels and stuff. And yeah, it's a pretty nice little section.
They talk about species as descriptors in this one
Yeah.
as well. If you want to introduce aliens, they talk about creating your fictional setting, your science fiction setting. Whether you want to do something along the lines of a first contact type storyline, or you want to go right to the stars, and it's the difference between doing, say, I don't know, the X Files,
Yeah.
versus Star Trek.
Yeah,
You know,
they definitely do break it down between that sort of like
Hard
yeah, I was
sci-fi.
gonna say, I don't know what the verse is, the opposite
Yeah.
of hard, like
It's
sci-fi and hard sci-fi.
Yeah. Or what the normal nerd would be, Star Trek, Star Wars.
Yeah, essentially, yeah, like fantastical, like science fiction, or very gritty, hard science fiction. And
well, yeah, when you
and it
think about,
covers
I
all
mean,
those things.
yeah, Star Trek still had a level of fantasy, but Star Trek also had a very strong level of science fiction,
Yes.
as it were. It had a cerebralness to it.
I mean, without going through this, I mean, there's a ton of stuff in here. This is actually awesome. And once again, I like to mention points that I read on the server, but this is going to apply to every one of these chapters. The argument that there isn't enough, that's not the purpose of a universal one book system. It's to give you just enough to get started, and then they'll either build with a setting book that you could get if you want to concentrate on
a specific thing.
Yeah, on a specific genre. But it's not fair to any company. They have 9 settings they're adding in this book. They can only put so much, but there's a lot of information in here in 10 pages.
Yeah.
Well, how about this, real quick? Just in the section where it says suggested creatures and NPCs for a science fiction game, you could come right to this section and figure out what game you're going to run. Because, I mean, you think about, oh, look, I want to run a sci-fi game. Assassins. Oh, Are they chrono assassins? Are they from the future? Are they from the past? Uh,
Yeah.
are they mystical? Are they rogue robots who've gone crazy? You know what I'm saying? Is it a rogue AI control? Just on that first thing alone, then you go a little further and you look and oh look, kaiju. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Godzilla, anyone?
Mm.
Or what was it? Pacific Rim.
Yeah.
Yes.
You got so many options just from looking at the suggested creatures and NPCs for the sci-fi section, and they
And
give you
oh,
what's that 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So it's at least 29 suggested creatures and NPCs.
Yeah.
and
And
oh,
they give you long-term, short-term effects of gravity on the body. They give you a nice. Once again, they add these wonderful tables that I love that they do on interplanetary travel. It gives you estimated time travel from one place to another with different engine types.
So the idea that you want to use, so you again, how you can do that? Do I want to use that? We have to use cryo sleep to get
Yeah.
from one place to the other, or do they have sufficient faster than light travel that's going to get us where we need to go? Or
And I mean, this might be the cop out answer. I know some people are going to say I'm going to give the cop out answer, but they say, how about if I want more? Well, Stars Without Fire is coming out.
well, if you really want more, develop it. Don't be
that
lazy.
too. Yeah, it's more supposed to be like a
No, but even for the person that's not capable of developing it,
Yeah,
the,
okay, I get.
you,
It. I'll give you that.
I mean,
But
well, on top of that, well, one, you can create it. This is if you feel like there's not enough, you can. This is supposed to be a springboard for your imagination,
yeah,
where you're supposed to say, "Hey, what if they did this? Oh, I could make the rule for that, or something like that. Or
yeah,
I can craft the exact spaceship I wanted, or whatever."
and I think they give enough examples of things that you could just reskin stuff. You could use the same stats but change its effect. I
And
mean, I don't see that being too hard for anyone.
I'm sure, sure in the near future or even now, there's supplements released by people on Drive Through RPG or whatever. If you're not
yes.
capable of crafting yourself, just go out and look. Maybe someone already did it for you.
I mean, a
Right.
good friend of ours, Christopher Gonza Gaming, has some great sci-fi
Yeah,
supplement.
Cruel Stars is
Yeah.
great stuff out there, guys.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. So even if it's not particularly what you're looking for in a book, there might be something out there, and if you can't make it yourself, just take a quick look.
Take a look around. Now that's something that Monty Cook Games did. And they talk about it all the time. They created the Cypher Creator Program just for that reason, because they know they can't create everything. They can't cover every base. Although they do a good job. But they allow us to be creative too. They inspire us to be creative.
And I'm about to contradict myself again. I
Oh my!
know I said, I don't like races as descriptors, but artificially intelligent is pretty sweet.
Yes, it's a very good one. Yeah, yeah.
Well, see,
Uh,
that's the thing, and that's what I'm saying. I think it just might work for specific.
It's very. It depends on the circumstance and the thing at
Mm.
hand. Because artificially intelligent, you're just a robot, right?
Yeah.
In that sense, you're like a cyborg or something.
Mm.
But yeah, that's the beauty of these sections. They give you these like beautiful little inspirations and again, it makes it so much easier if you have a kind of an idea like, hey, I kind of want to run a sci-fi game. Just glancing at this section, it's just filled with so many different ideas and little, like, again, Anthony spoke about it. They even talk about the effects of gravity on you, the effects of like in a vacuum. If you want to be really specific about certain things, it plants those ideas in your head, or gives you a little bit of a base to jump off for those things.
Well, I mean, and yeah, and if that's kind of people trying to go, if you're just kind of wishy-washy, or don't know what that is meaning to you, just look at other things out there. If you ever read The Expanse or watched the TV show, and it tells you about people who were born in space and zero G or artificial gravity environments versus being born on a planet versus being born on Mars, you know versus Earth. It's really cool stuff that adds an interesting twist to your game, and it adds also interesting uh characterizations. So characters do different things in different environments or function different ways in different environments. It's pretty cool.
Yep, yep.
So
Any more to touch on for sci-fi?
No, I think we basically hit. I mean, I've noticed. I think the general theme is that there's a lot more changes to the genres that I was expecting. If that makes any sense. Like I thought, before I read them, I was like, oh, especially the ones that were in the original book. I was like, oh, this is going to just be a port over. But no, they actually put in a lot more work
Yes,
into.
most definitely.
I think what they, yeah, they to me is what they did was I think they just kind of the theme of the book. It's
Mm,
been the theme of the revised edition. If you look at the revised edition of the book so far, the biggest thing that we've seen is ultimate customization.
Yes.
We're able to customize our characters and our settings and our thought processes to approach its complete customization, and that is such an alluring, such an appealing, attractive aspect to this game for me, for this book, the whole nine.
Most definitely. But yeah, I think that lets us move on to the next chapter.
Anthony, please introduce this section.
I know you guys know this is probably the one genre that's most near and dear to my heart. I love horror games. I love to do Halloween games. So this is chapter 16, horror. It starts on page 280 or 282 on the PDF, and it's a lot of it is similar to the original. They give you the basic tropes of running a horror game. They also discuss consent in gaming and how to start a consent conversation, which is extremely important, especially in a genre like horror. And I think we should just talk about that a little. I know that Shauna Germain and Sean K. Reynolds released a consent in gaming, which kind of like burned down the gaming industry
For some reason.
I know.
For some reason.
Crazy.
But I mean, and we definitely gonna make a video on that soon, maybe next week or the week after, because I think that whole controversy was for nothing.
It's crazy.
But neither here nor there. But yeah, that's a conversation you definitely should have with your players when you're running a horror game. And I could say personally, I've had instances where I didn't have that conversation, or I didn't necessarily approach it in a way where I let people know exactly what direction I wanted to go in, and I kind of regret that. So as you get older, you learn. So I learned to, like, hey, this is what I'm going for. I'm going for body horror. I'm going for whatever it is, to make sure that the players consent beforehand. Because at the end of the day, even though you're running a scary story or something graphic, you want everyone to be comfortable and safe when they sit at the table with you.
Yeah.
So I think that's a conversation that definitely needs to be had.
And that was actually something I gotta say that was really, even before the consent in gaming at Gen Con, that was pretty cool that we ended up having that discussion at the table before we ran GM Roulette that night.
Yeah.
Because we played a horror game, and we basically had to find out what was on the table and what wasn't.
Yes.
Which was pretty cool because we kind of pushed the envelope with that.
Yeah, there's not, and I think that's not to get into this, but that's not. I think that's one of the common arguments that you hear when people talk about consent. That somehow, some way, someone's trying to stifle your ability to push the envelope and to deal with adult themes, and that's really not what it is. It's about everyone being comfortable
with what's going to go on at the table.
Because
we're telling those adult
and,
themes together,
and no one's saying you can't touch on those themes. It's just you need the appropriate group to touch on those themes. Right. You need everyone to be on board for those themes for it to actually work and for everyone to be comfortable and enjoy the experience. Otherwise, one person who might not be comfortable is just gonna ruin their whole time.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And the hell with ruining their time, possibly traumatizing a person.
Exactly.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't think people, we live in a day and age of, a lot of sensitivity, and then you've got a lot of insensitivity on the other side of the coin because people were worried about, people being sensitive or have something to say about it. Mm-hmm. And, let's just get real. I don't think anybody in this group right here is sitting down would be okay with, let's tell a story about slavery.
Yeah.
I don't, yeah, I don't think I want to play that game. You know,
You know what's worse than that? It's not the fact that somebody wants to tell a story about slavery. If someone wants to be offended when someone's offended about someone telling a story about slavery.
Exactly.
That's even worse. You
Right.
know what I mean?
And that's what I'm saying, but you're gonna call me a snowflake because I don't want to deal with a thing like that. And it's not even about being a snowflake. People don't understand what kind of emotional trauma or deep-seated things that you might have inside of you. I mean, I'm half a century old. I remember my great grandmother and my grandmother, who both were born. One was born during slavery, the other one was born during indentured servitude. Sharecroppers, people who could never be free. And the stories and the pain that they went through resonate in you, resonate in me. So why would I subject myself to that? It's not being a snowflake. That's just self-abuse. And
Most
you wouldn't
definitely.
do that. I wouldn't ask anybody to do that to themselves. So getting back to horror,
Yeah, that's why that
talked about all of that.
We could have kept the story that way. We could have said it that it was a zombie plantation. I was trying to make a joke.
But either way, though, that's why that consent discussion is so important.
Yeah.
But that is just again, it's not a minor thing. It's a very important thing, but it's a small part of that section, the horror section. The section has a bunch other very nice things in it, including their optional rules, which is by far
the
one
best
of the,
in the book.
Yeah, exactly. They're very good.
Shock, horror, and madness.
Yeah.
So I mean, those things. The horror mode we've used a ton.
Shock mode we've used.
I've used shock and madness both because I had some friends who wanted to play a Call of Cthulhu game, and of course, that's just the best way to
exactly
do Call of Cthulhu. Even the way they go about, and it's kind of interesting. Everything that they bring into the game, like artifacts and stuff, all have a similar methodology of presentation. But what I kind of dig about the horror artifacts is that not all of them are just plain out horror things. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The one they got listed, Sphere 23, could be in a sci-fi game.
Mm-hmm. I think that's like the running theme in this whole thing is that that it doesn't matter what section you pull it from. If it makes sense for your particular game, go ahead and use it.
Yep.
Right. Absolutely.
But yeah, it's definitely a lot of nice, juicy stuff in this section for running.
And once
games.
again, with the shock, horror, and madness rules, they have a nice little table that gives you an explanation of
nice example.
Nice example. And once again, just because it's written in the example table doesn't mean that you have to follow that. Like this, we'll just use the shock rules for example. It has unexpectedly seeing a corpse might be a level 2 roll, but for your kids on bike thing, that actually might be a level 4 roll.
Right.
So you could adjust it how you see fit.
Or unexpectedly seeing a corpse, maybe your character, is a coroner.
That's a level 0 roll for a Vietnam game.
Yeah.
Yeah, or somebody or it could be just the opposite, depending on how you build your character.
Mm-hmm.
You could say, this guy is green. He's green behind the ears. This is his first time in the game. So oh God, corpse. So
I love playing those green behind the ear characters.
No, I the green behind the ear characters are great, but I think Al has cornered the market on a guy who don't do nothing.
Oh yeah, no, definitely those are definitely my favorite.
Just to touch on horror mode is my favorite. That's when the GM intrusion mechanic escalates and goes higher and higher every time somebody rolls to match whatever the GM intrusion target number is. So it usually caps out at 10, I believe, right? But we've run it even higher than that, where it's basically every other roll is a GM intrusion, and it's just awesome. It's great for action horror games.
Yes,
and it's good as slasher films. It's great for all sorts of games where you want to really rank up the tension.
And again, it doesn't necessarily have to be a horror game or anything like that. If you just want to add tension to a scene, maybe you're playing a sci-fi scene where they're trying to, or excuse me, yeah, sci-fi or even modern, where you have a bomb defusal scene happening, and you want that scene to be really tense, to have the roles really like, hey, any slip up here, you're like the bomb could explode or whatever have you. You have that scaling intrusions with each snip or whatever have you, or whatever process is involved in.
Yeah, so and that's what I'm saying, and just give it another title instead of calling it horror mode, call it tension mode.
Or, yeah, exactly.
Or stress. The stress sequence of the game. Like I said, once again, nothing in the game breaks anything. It's so modular that it just plugs into itself.
Yeah, and chapter 16 is my chapter. Optional rules rock.
It is definitely awesome. I guess.
Al, you want to take us to chapter 17?
Yeah, I was just about to say that. So chapter 17 is actually a brand new chapter or brand new genre that they've added. It wasn't in the previous book. Brand new to this book. Starts on page 286 of the book. 288 if you're on the PDF, and it's the romance genre. A genre they didn't include before, but definitely a genre or even an aspect to games that happens. I wouldn't say frequently. It depends on how many bards you have in your party, but it's definitely something that happens on occasion where you might have a suitor type situation where a PC falls in love with an NPC or vice versa or whatever have you. And this section kind of covers that stuff where it's like. It also has that consent conversation where they have it in the horror section, whereas this is more of like, what kind of intimacy are you okay with seeing and such like that, which again is very important because not everybody wants to see a love scene in their role-playing game. Yeah. So that might make certain people uncomfortable, and again, that's why these conversations are important.
Which kind of cool.
I think this is more than just like I think this is a genre in itself. When I think of romance, I think.
No, it could definitely be its own genre. I'm just saying that most commonly it's seen as like a side thing in a game. But romance could easily be its own genre. Yeah.
Because when I first thought of romance, I thought of magical girls. I thought of.
What I was thinking for me, when I see romance, and it's something that I'm probably going to have some fun with, but like with my wife, I can play a rom-com. You really kind of got never thought about doing that before. But the first thing I saw when I saw it, I was like, wow, okay, I can run a rom-com, if my wife wanted to have, some friends over, because she's told other people about it. Perfect way to introduce a group of ladies to, a role-playing game where it's light, it's not focused on combat, it's not focused on the monster in the closet or under the bed. You're just telling, a funny style story. It's got the romance in it, but it's got some humor to it. And you think about it. That's perfect PG-13 storyline.
On top of that, what Anthony said, honestly, I never thought about it like that. Where he said magical girls. So on top of that, you can use it in like a teenage high school type trope, where it's you have friends, you have crushes, you have the relationship levels, which are some optional rules they have in this section. They have rules.
Like Al Hook introduced me to My Hero Academia, and I could see using these rules in a My Hero Academia game.
Yeah, because again, they're kids, they have these sort of tropes within their friend groups.
And think about this too, Anthony. We can go back in time. Remember all the coming of age stories we had coming up, the Breakfast Club, the Last American Virgin, all of that kind of stuff, Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Yeah. All of those things could be, thrown right into this type of concept. So it opens up the doors.
I mean, I must admit, I don't have much experience with romance role-playing games. The only experience I have is when I first started dating my wife while she was in college. I ran a Days of Our Lives game, or I tried to run a Days. I think I told you the story before because I was trying. Maybe if I had these rules, it would have been a better game than the hot mess that I put together.
Wait, what system did you use for that?
It might have been Palladium because that's what I was running at the time. Yeah.
But what's funny is, like I said, I don't think any of us had the idea. I didn't have the idea to do any of this until literally just talking about it,
Mm.
and after reading the section, when I
I,
saw
I
like,
I also think it's
but
funny that I was just gonna say. I also think it's funny that the three of us came up when we saw romance. We came up with three different subgenres
Or
immediately.
idea,
yeah,
yeah.
that's kind of cool. But see, that's the beauty of what we're talking about. Now, mind you, there is a RPG out there that is basically a romance game called Blue Rose.
Yes,
If you guys are
I've
familiar with it.
never read it, but I've heard of it. Yeah.
I read like the intro and probably the first few chapters of it, and I don't know where my PDF is to this day, but I had it on PDF. It's when because it was when it was the Roll20 games were a big deal or whatever it was, you know. Um, but yeah, this is great. It also comes with some optional rules too, optional rules for infatuation and relationship levels. So that concept is pretty tight. When I think about it, because infatuation basically, is going to deal with, you know, um, how those initial encounters happen and things of that nature, and then relationship levels, they go into literally, is the first meeting,
Yeah.
the sense of connection between the two people, all of that kind of stuff. Are they real friends, deep connection, deep friendships? And what I kind of dig about the romance is, to me, it doesn't even always have to be like necessarily a romance storyline where these rules can come into play. You could just be telling a buddy story.
Yep. You
You
know
could
what?
come out of rules. These rules are brilliant.
Yes.
What I love about all the optional rules, like I said, you could
Use them for
port it over.
anything.
Yeah, the relationship, like that's a rule that I'm gonna use for pretty much. You hang out at the same bar. You want to get information from the barkeep. Every
What
time
level
you
of a relationship you have with the barkeep, right?
yeah,
And also on top of that, again, you shouldn't limit your scope to just the
yeah.
genres listed under. So here, with this relationship levels, one of the first things I actually thought about when I saw that was, I thought about games where you're like video games that you might want to like translate over into like Cypher system, like things like
Oh,
Stardew Valley, or like where you have a
yeah,
community of NPCs where you're like trying to build friendships with certain ones to learn more about their life or whatever, like Animal Crossing, like something like
yeah.
that, where you're like becoming friends with the community.
That's
And
good. That's
yeah,
Exactly.
and
good.
that's not a romance thing. It's
Yeah.
just you're becoming friends with these people.
I mean, what's the video game that you're a lawyer?
Oh, not Professor. That's Phoenix Wright. Phoenix Wright is another
Yeah,
good example where
yeah,
these relationship levels where you're like
yeah.
potentially
Right.
going back to the same NPCs for like they're your informants or whatever, and you need to build that relationship with them until they reveal all their information to you or whatever have you. And it
So
could be
yeah,
it can use in so many there's so many different applications, not
and
just
that's what I'm
romance.
saying. You think about, um, oh my
Yeah,
God.
that's a good point. Now
What
you
I'm
got me
saying,
thinking about that.
Yeah, like I'm really considering like an animal. I love Animal Crossing. I would not mind
Yeah.
running an Animal Crossing
well,
like mini story or something like.
Yeah, my
well,
mind is
guys,
like racing at all these like random things. Like, oh yeah, you can use that for that. That's a great point, Al.
well, that's what I'm saying, guys. If you really think about what this has done, in so many respects, this has kind of opened up our pathways to more games.
Yep.
To more diverse gaming in of itself. So I think, romance. When I first read romance, I'm like, huh? And now, and after reading it, like I said, it opened up that that thought process is pretty awesome.
Once again, like I saw some comments on Twitter when they were like, "Why?" and my response is, "Why not?" Like,
Right.
why do you care what someone else has enjoyment of? And even if you don't necessarily, like, once again, I've not necessarily played any romance games, but that doesn't mean that I can't utilize, even if I was one of those people that say, hey, I'm never going to play a romance game, which is not true. I'll try it. So if you're a good romance GM, hit us up. We'll play.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that we can't use the information that's in there for our own games if that's what you choose to do.
Exactly.
And I'm gonna dip my foot in the deep end, and take the plunge and try to run a romance game. Just got to work out the parameters, So look for it, people. We're gonna do some more things out here. You know,
Yeah, it's definitely super interesting.
Most
Cypher
definitely.
Unlimited is just that. Cypher Unlimited.
But yeah, I guess that we've touched on everything for romance. We can move on to the next one. I guess Dean should be the one to
Yeah.
introduce this one.
I was like, D better introduce this one.
Well, superheroes, guys. You know, what can I not say about superheroes? That should be the question. This section is pretty much what it was from the original book, but again, you know, superhero genre can be on so many different levels. You can run it gritty, down to earth, you know, with low key powers.
I don't mean to cut
And
you
you
off,
can
Dean, but
page
superheroes.
289 and 291. I'm sorry.
He got too excited. He got too excited about talking about it.
You know, and again, you can run that, like I said, you can run the game from, you know, street level gritty heroes, Daredevil, Batman, you know, those type of guys to the cosmic heavies. Um, you know, I've adapted characters, created characters, I've written up, you know, shameless plug, you know, check out the creator program and look for Heroic Essentials 1 or my pre-gens and foci supplements, because superheroes is just such a wide open setting genre that, you know what, the sky's the limit, you know. And I don't know, you know, if you get it, but like that's where they get into power shifts. They talk about NPCs and how power shifts work for them. And for those of you who don't know what a power shift is, a power shift is a free level of effort.
Well,
You
not
can
level of
basically,
effort, but it can augment your character in certain ways.
Yes.
The
but
book
not
gives,
just a free.
oh,
I mean, rules is written. It's a free level of effort.
I mean,
But
yeah.
No,
But,
actually, technically, in the old book, that would have been correct. In the new book, it isn't.
yeah.
In
yeah,
the new book,
they
they actually state you can adjust abilities.
right.
Optional rule.
Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
there's a ton of different ways you can utilize power shifts, but the what it really boils down to is what gives your character that super heroic nature. Like they go beyond the limitations of their character by having these power shifts.
And also to be said about power shifts, or power shift about the superhero genre in general. This is the one section or the one genre that they actually take difficulty numbers to 15
Yes.
to also represent that heroic, those heroic deeds and the things that superheroes can do, because we're 30 for, you know, a typical player in a superhero game, you know, that's quite possible. You know,
Power
without,
shifts.
you know, you think about it. If you went by the standard rules, not allowing more than 3 power shifts in a particular, you know, pool or skill set. So let's just say it was a might task. You had 3 power shifts. Then you expend 2 levels of effort. That level 10 difficulty just dropped to a 5.
With, just like that.
You know, somebody gives you an asset, it drops to a 4.
Or you trained in a specific task for
You're trained, yeah.
task.
It drops in another one.
It drops
yeah.
to a 3.
Yeah.
You're specialized, it drops to a 2. So you just went from a 10, something that's totally and utterly impossible for a normal human being, and to you go,
I need higher than a 6.
Yeah.
You know, I'm here.
Yeah.
You know?
It really allowed, now that you said that, I was laughing, I was chuckling to myself about a joke, but it really allows you to go beyond plus ultra.
Exactly.
These power shifts and like adjusting the scale from, you know, from 10 to 15 really gives you that room to really give those extra challenges that are needed to show those, highlight those really extra, you know, I would say exaggerated moments in superhero strength or speed or whatever have you, where a normal person might struggle to pick up this boulder. Oh, superhuman, like in our little discussion we just had, they like it's a difficulty 5 for this regular human to lift up this boulder, but a superhuman that we discussed with all these like power shifts and training, whatever have you, they don't even have to roll to lift up this boulder. It just happens. Like
Right.
that's why having that
Yeah.
sliding scale to 15 really illustrates that point of, hey, they can be even way beyond the human limitations.
And I think Guys of the Fall kind of addressed it as well.
Yeah.
when they talk about, they call them divine shifts, power
Yeah.
shifts, same thing. But it's really cool too because they talk about going those difficulties also going up to 15, where they're saying like, let's just say a level 10 difficulty was picking up a bus.
Yeah.
A level 11 difficulty might literally be shifting a mountain.
Mm.
So they're exponential. They're not just, the simple sliding scale. When you get to 10, okay, it's, this much more. No, it's literally, it's something significant, and it should be showcased as such.
I'm happy that you brought up Gods of the Fall because I was going to bring up this point, but I think superheroes and science fiction are the two settings that every other setting, every other genre could easily mix into. One of
Yes.
the things I loved about superheroes is that everything that we just mentioned before this, you could have horror superhero game, you could have
Yeah.
a romance superhero game, a sci-fi superhero game. It's the same thing works with a fantasy superhero game, which is Gods of the Fall, modern superhero game, post-apocalyptic, which we're going to touch next. And the other point I want to make about superheroes is, which they actually mentioned in the new book, is the section that we spoke about in the first video about customizing foci is your friend in the superheroes campaign.
Oh
You know,
God, yes.
you don't have to follow the built-in foci and descriptors they have in the book. You should actually try to create customized foci using those foci lists that they give you, which is a godsend, to create the exact character you want. I think a lot of times people, especially on a server or just from social media, have a difficult time going, hey, can I make Spider-Man?
Yeah.
Or can I make Thor?
Yes.
I think Cypher System actually handles it really well. It just takes a little more work than it would do if you were playing in another genre. But I think you could pretty much create most characters,
Well,
especially with the revised edition,
yeah.
which gives you tools on how to customize your foci.
With the revised edition, you can do it hands down. I did it already for Kenny when I created the Avengers at the end of Infinity War, and that was, I guess you could call it a labor of love. It was so much fun. I mean, I created Captain America, and I got to tell people, I created Captain America as a speaker, which, when I looked at it, that character was totally and utterly badass. It was Captain America, but you know what? Like how they emphasize it in the movies, he's really good at that. Those inspirational
Yeah.
speeches. It was awesome, So that's the other thing I think when you approach character creation, especially in the superhero genre, don't get so caught up in, necessarily the type and the foci and all that. First of all, conceptualize what you want. Then look at your types, look at your descriptors, look at your foci, or as like Anthony said, build your foci. Because with the new way it's set up, it's so easy to build, whatever character you could conceive of.
Yeah, it's definitely awesome. And those power shifts that they include in there, again, these are just examples of power shifts. You can use power shifts to augment your character in any way. You can have that discussion with your GM. But yeah, it's just such a loose and powerful tool to exemplify the superhero strengths and versatility.
You know what I love about this section? They added the evening, the odds pat.
Yeah,
Um,
that
and that's something that I know all three of us always did, but a lot of newer players tend to, newer GMs tend to, like, I would say, are scared to take away agency from either a player. But if you want your characters to feel heroic, allow them to be heroic. If they're running, if they're a speed character and they're being chased by humans, why make them roll? You're the Flash. They just see a puff of smoke and you are gone.
right.
Even though you know what I mean? Like, don't give them the option to roll badly and let some, overweight
Mundane.
security guard catch the Flash.
But
You know what I mean?
but in turn, conversely, like
Mm.
in the first Batman movie in '89, not the first Batman, but the Michael Keaton version of Batman. If you remember correctly, that final sequence of the movie, Batman is just wiping out the Joker's henchmen, and then when he gets into the church, he gets into it with with the other guard, the other henchman, and this guy is putting something on Batman. It was like, okay, kind of cool,
Yeah.
we got somebody who's trained. So those aspects, those are the GM intrusions you can throw in. GM intrusions that I've used. Anthony, you and Al were in the game when instead of adding more monsters or something, we changed the dynamic. I had already written down that when you guys are playing, against a metamorphic, adversary. So, yeah, okay. Instead of turning him, bringing more in, no, this guy, broke apart into, three lesser power creatures that you guys had to deal with, lesser level, but still with interesting power. All that kind of stuff. It encourages it. I really dig it.
To kind of touch on what both you guys just said, it kind of tied together. You again, the people playing in these like superhero settings, they want to feel powerful. They want to feel like, hey, my character is beyond a human or a regular person. So in the situation that you described, where like Batman is beating up the Joker's henchman until he gets inside, where he approaches that powerful guy, right, the trained henchman. So in the beginning of that, if it was a Cypher game, you say, hey, you don't even have to roll to knock out these like low level guys. You just beat your way in. And then, hey, you throw as soon as you enter the church, you throw a punch at the next one, and he's standing, and then there's an actual fight, and then it kind of builds that tension of, hey, you're knocking out these low level guys. Oh, hey, this guy didn't fall down with my punch. Oh, this is an actual like, hey, I need to take this seriously, and it kind of amps that atmosphere.
Right. So
and what I was just gonna say, once again, it gives you a list of NPCs and a list of artifacts and equipment that goes with the genre. But superheroes is, you could pull from modern, you could pull from pretty much any of the other genres as well.
Yep.
It's very similar to sci-fi in that aspect as well.
Yep. I think we've hit on superheroes.
I think so.
All right, so
never good on superheroes.
But aside from Dean, I guess we can move on. Yeah. But yeah, so the next genre they have listed is on page 295 of the book, or 297 of the PDF, chapter 19. It's post-apocalyptic, which is a pretty popular one. A lot of settings use that sort of like a lot of stories use that setting, and it's actually from Expanded World, so it's one of the ones they brought over from there. So it's a nice little addition. And yeah, they talk about creating your post-apocalyptic game, how one post-apocalyptic game might focus on something like maybe gritty survival, while one focuses on the absurdity of the communities that follow or something like that. And it talks about customizing the different aftermath situations. And yeah, it's definitely a very powerful tool for crafting your post-apocalyptic setting.
Yeah, I mean, it concentrates heavily. They have some cool charts on scavenging, which I think would be a big aspect of, who doesn't want to be Mad Max?
Right.
So
and vice versa. And conversely, Numenera is their post-apocalyptic setting.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, that's another one. What's the one? The video game that everybody wants plays.
Borderlands.
Borderlands. Yes.
We hear like once a week, everyone's, hey, I want to do a Borderlands game. Well, this is the setting, the genre to help you out to create a Borderlands.
And what's kind of cool about it, I like, the fact that they added in, environmental stuff that, really come to like wasteland threats. So, it's not necessarily that, you're worried about, everything isn't always a conflict between you and an NPC or, another character or something, but literally the environment is dangerous. You might be driving through the quote unquote light and, you're driving through there, but, this place has sinkholes with giant sandworms that eat cars. I mean, whatever kind of thought process that you're looking to do. And it, like I was saying about customizing your aftermath. So you can have a tightly focused aftermath, what that it deals with, you know, one of Anthony's favorite zombies.
Yeah.
It can be a post-apocalyptic world. You know, all the resources are gone. You know, maybe 30 years in the future, we'd had a zombie apocalypse, and now it's the survival in this particular tightly focused story. Or you can go huge, massive. You know, Numenera is a prime example. Numenera touches on so much. You know, it's such a huge sandbox to play in. So post-apocalyptic has that allure that it can be massive and wide open, or tightly focused, or it can be all of those things all at once.
First of all, any genre that lets me use a rocket fist artifact, I'm all in on it, baby.
Yeah.
I want rocket fist in my life now.
The genre of post-apocalyptic definitely leaves the room open for a lot of fun items like that, where you have a lot of like tinkering of old technologies mixed with just to create something cohesive. In this situation, I'm assuming someone found some thrusters and attached it to a gauntlet of some sort, and it became a rocket fist. And a post-apocalyptic is all about that, combining what you have left into something cohesive.
And so you got rocket fist. Again, just like when I watched Pacific Rim, and the guy had the rocket assisted punch. In the game, the thrusters came out of his elbow so he could hit harder. Well, I'm just waiting for people to, I'm going to create the artifact. It's going to be called Boot to the Nads. Rocket assisted kick.
But that is the fun of this post-apocalyptic settings, is finding those or even creating them yourself, where I definitely would not be opposed if I was a GM in a post-apocalyptic game where someone said, hey, I found this rocket booster, and hey, I found this boot. Can I combine them into, that kick? Yeah, exactly. Like, that's the beauty of this setting. It's like you can kind of mix and match the stuff you find, and hopefully you create something fun, because that's the whole.
And since they gave you the new crafting rules, you can immediately have something for them to roll to.
Exactly.
There it is. There it is.
But
they also give you a species descriptor, a Morlock, which I think Morlocks were in the original book, correct? I don't think
it's expanded worlds, but yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
And they give you the roaches and something else.
Yeah, there's actually a bunch of stuff in this setting too. Well, the major thing is the scavenging, which is a huge part of the post-apocalyptic. But yeah, as far as the species go, they have the roach guys and they have the Morlocks, which is, again, in the post-apocalyptic setting, you might have someone who's mutated. Might not be a roach, but again, that's a base. Maybe they're a beetle person or a slug person or whatever have you. But it gives you that base to work off. Hey, there might be mutants here.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, this was pretty. This is pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
And once again, this is another genre that you could mix a lot of the other genres.
Yes.
I
actually have plans for a fantasy post-apocalyptic game. Don't tell my CVS coworkers. Our fantasy game is gonna turn a little dark.
That's awesome.
But I'll definitely have plans for that in the near future for our game. So yeah, the post-apocalyptic can be worked in with many different genres. But that goes again for all the genres. You can kind of find ways to get their little bits and pieces here and there to help further your whatever setting you might be running. But yeah. Think we can move on?
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think so.
So, Fairy Tales, people. That's chapter 28, page 302 or 304 in the PDF.
Yep.
Fairy Tales comes from expanded worlds as well.
Mm-hmm.
Fairy Tale, I mean, it's not literally what it says. Create that setting. It talks about the nature of the Fae lands and stuff like that. Fairy Tale wonders and threats, of course, the artifacts and everything like that. I think Fairy Tale was something that I have not really run since the days of running the old World of Darkness when I was dealing with Changeling. But the way they got it set here, I really think I want to get back into it.
Yeah, I always love the concept of the Fae Court. It kind of reminds me of a Carnival Row a little, and I know that Carnival Row, they actually have a Cypher System conversion for the TV show.
Yeah.
The whole Fae Court and I think it's an interesting concept. Like, you haven't run much of it in the way it's written here, but we actually did GM Roulette using fairy tale a little bit with the
Correct.
Candyland.
With Candyland, right?
Yeah,
And that's the thing, but now with a, I guess, a more cohesive set of ideas when you start looking at it, and that's the thing. Fairy tale can be very lighthearted, or fairy tale can be very scary.
Yes.
Because when you start getting into the lore of a lot of folk tale and things like that, fairies and pixies, and they weren't very nice.
yeah,
They show the magicians. If you ever watched that, and they had the fairies. Those fairies, I mean, they had good reason because of the history, their story, but they were some maniacal, mean SOBs.
Also, the threat table for fairy tales is awesome. Like, you don't even have to run this for fairy tales. This threat table could be run in fantasy. It could be run in modern fantasy. I just picked a random one, and it was like victims in immediate range of this graffiti and art cover wall must succeed on an intellect effect task or be thrown into the wall or become one more piece of the art. It's like what, Dorian Gray?
Right. Or the razor blade butterflies. Now that one's scary.
I really love these threat tables, to be honest with you.
You know what?
For all the settings.
I look at the threat tables, which I find cool. I look at the threat tables as sort of, retooled random encounter tables.
Mm-hmm.
Because you could use it for that if you, especially if you had like a specific storyline and maybe the players are moving too fast and you didn't have anything else planned. Boom, let's roll on the fairy tale threat table. And just imagine, you guys are doing a mission and you run into an angry noble. No, get out of my town. You out here. And that could derail your entire adventure.
And on top of that, conversely, they can be used to spark full plot lines. Even though these are stated as they basically look like little minor incidences. Like, I'm just gonna pull a random one myself.
Yeah.
Like wish upon a star, a falling star of green a falling star of green fire streaks down and impacts, and it's basically you just have to dodge out of the way of this falling star. But on top of that, again, if you needed inspiration for a full-on story, hey, why did the star fall down? What is that star? How is it affecting the ground nearby? Like, maybe that star is now infecting the ground and it's now killing all the vegetation, and they have to figure out where it came from, who sent it, blah blah blah. It can all be used in either way. And again,
see, I thought even different. It's a freaking star, it destroyed a whole city when it crashed into the.
Or that, well, even that disaster level,
we're all going to different places because I'm looking at the same thing. And just the fact that it said an antagonistic creature steps out of the crater.
I didn't even read the last sentence. Like, see, damn, boom,
what I'm saying.
boom.
So my thought process was, instead of maybe an antagonistic creature, what if these face spirits infect an entire town, and you got to figure out what's going on, or you need to separate them because the face spirit is corrupting the human and the human is corrupting the fae, and it's going to make something like even worse. Just boom, you just come up with an idea. So I love it. It's awesome.
I think we can Fairy tale, again, it's pretty straightforward. It's mostly the random tables for the wonders and threats. There's not just threats, there's also wonders, like what might make your fairy tale fantastical or whatever have you, which is also another great, inspiration for plot hooks or whatever have you, or, just even setting atmosphere. But yeah, all that is in this section, which is, again, pretty stellar.
Like I said, they even add a list of quirks, which is kind of cool, that you could just add to something, sometimes invisible. You might have, or could you imagine, you have a jacket and you're wearing your jacket, but you move too violently at one point and it'll cry like a baby. I mean, just crazy stuff, which is awesome.
Yeah, this is, it's a little bit on the smaller end of the other. This one's only 5 pages, but there's a chock full of stuff in here in these 5 pages.
I think again, it's I don't think the page count is what it is. It's just such
The
the
content.
content. Yeah, the
Yeah.
content is always awesome with this, you know. And I mean, we're seeing a lot of the same things about all the genres,
Yeah.
you know.
I mean, it's just well written and well.
Right.
Once again, this is not designed to. I'm gonna take these 5 pages and run a full campaign without you doing some of the
The
legwork
jumping
yourself.
boards.
Yeah, but yeah, they basically jumping boards, but they give you all these awesome charts. They give you all this random information that makes your job of writing the stories in your games a lot easier.
Most definitely. But yeah, I think we can move on to the last chapter in
Yeah.
genre.
The
Was
last, but definitely not the least.
hold on before we go? Was Fairy Tales? Where did that come from?
Oh, Expanded Worlds. Dean mentioned it. It's from Expanded
Yeah.
Worlds.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Cool.
Yep, definitely. If you're lacking Expanded Worlds, this does bring some of those tidbits in there. But Expanded World is still a very valuable book to have. I did see discussion on the server about this because not everything from Expanded Worlds made it into the revised.
Someone
horror
asked
book.
me on the server about it before, the book had gone live and everything, and I tried to explain to them just that there is a chunk of Expanded Worlds in here, a chunk of its ideology, but Expanded Worlds is definitely a must-have book if you're the type of person, if you're a completist or
And it's not even a chunk of. It's only two of the genres.
three.
Three.
Yeah.
Historical is not from Hispanic world.
Yes,
Historical.
it
Yeah, it is.
Yes, it is.
Historical was also in the original.
No, it wasn't.
Yes, it was. It was in the modern.
Oh, we're having a debate here.
Well, no. Yeah, it was in modern. It was.
I'll
It
put
was
it
in
right now.
modern. It was under modern, but it wasn't
Its
fully
own.
fleshed
Yeah,
out.
yeah.
And if you go to Expanded Worlds, they fleshed it out in
Yes.
Expanded Worlds.
Yes,
Because
yes.
they had 2 or 3 pages in modern of historical.
Yeah, but
Yeah, like I said, if you look at Expanded Worlds, that's when they brought in like Descents from Nobility, where they start connecting literal foci to the genres and showing you kind of and it was like Flew Under the Jolly Roger, all of those things, were ones that came from Expanded Worlds.
But either way, this little discussion aside, in the new revised book,
Damn you!
it starts on historical genre. It's chapter 21. It starts on page 307, 309 on the PDF. And again, it touches on making a historically kind of accurate game. And even if you're not running a very historically accurate game, it gives you ideas on how to use historical, like, I'm blanking on the word, but like, because the book is right next to me, it touches on how to like include it in different genre, adapt it for different things. So like a time travel game, you can have it.
They have a nice sidebar that touches on exactly what you're saying. It's called historianess.
Yes.
And it said historianess is the quality of seeming historical or evoking historical feeling, even if it is not necessarily historical. So in other words, basically doing a genre piece. I mean, you think about it. Look at Pride, Prejudice, and Zombies, which is listed here. Penny Dreadful, the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen comic series. Those type things were not historically accurate or anything like that, but they took figures from, literature, historical figures from literature, and specific settings and things like that to evoke that whole idea. Alternate history. That's what you could actually.
Yes, that's a very elegant
quick example of doing alternate history games as well. Because
and it has a hell of a cool picture of what appears to be Jack the Ripper. On that same page.
Oh yeah, that Jack the Ripper picture is kind of scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so again, it lets you like give that feel of being in a historical place, and on top of that, it does. I was mentioning it before I like stumbled all over my words, but it gives you a section on here for time travel gaming. Because in a time travel game, you will be traveling to these historical parts, whether you're traveling backwards or forwards. Forwards, it doesn't really matter too much because you can make that up. But if you're traveling backwards in time, you definitely still want to keep the players in that feeling of being in that era. So when they're traveling back, 1800s, whatever, 1700s, they still feel like they're there instead of like, having all the extra technologies or whatever from their current time, they still have that historiness or however they write it in here. Yeah, it's just an alternate. Like they still might have their gadgets from traveling, but they're still in that atmosphere of the whatever time period they're in.
And that's something else that I kind of dig about it too, is when they talk about it, they even talk about it in another sidebar where they were talking about time travel and stuff, and they were saying how you could actually, use a player intrusion, giving the example, use a player intrusion to use your metagame knowledge,
Yeah.
to affect the situation. So, and it's kind of cool because they say it manifests itself, it could be a premonition or, and you think about it, no different than what they were talking about in predation. When you hit the time anomalies, you get these strange visions or whatever, use the same concept, so now it's like, historical game with time anomalies. Yeah, that's the ticket. Different stuff to have fun with. So
I mean, I really love that this section is more of, for this genre in particular, it's more about advice on how to run it, because this is essentially modern era game, just dealing with different time periods of our history,
Yeah,
Earth's history.
right.
So it concentrates more on actually, giving you tips on how to run it and how to make it seem authentic to the, to the time period. And I mean, this is really cool stuff.
Yeah, it really is. And I think, you know, we've touched on just about everything, guys.
Yeah, I think we've pretty much wrapped up the genre talk. That was the last one. They all offer very helpful advice, which is what we, basically been talking about this whole past 2 hours, believe it or not. But yeah, definitely pick up the book. If you're having, even if you're not running Cypher System, they give splendid advice on certain aspects of each of these genres that can still be used in other game, systems or whatever have you. It's still excellent advice.
And we have one more video in the series that we will be doing, and we'll be touching in the actual GMing portion in part 3 of our walkthrough of the revised Cypher System Core book. So be on the lookout for that video, which should be very interesting because I believe they did make some changes in the game mastering section, and they changed some of the monster lists and stuff. So we'll be excited to talk about that on our next walkthrough.
Yep, most definitely.
So, yeah, see us for part 3, people. We'll be back, and like I said before, Anthony said it, Alice said it. Leave us some comments down below. Tell us what you're looking for. We're more than willing to make some community-driven videos. Would be awesome. And I was just gonna say, continue to support.
Yeah,
we love you guys. Thanks.
And I was gonna say on top of that, not just suggestions for anything. Let us know, like, if you have the revised book, let us know what did you like about a certain genre or setting. Like, what's your favorite optional rule that they included in there? And drop those in the comments down below. We could talk about them and how you've implemented them even.
Yeah, I'll be curious to know if there was a specific setting that wasn't in the book that you would have wished was in there. I mean, that would be cool to know if maybe there was a genre that they were missing.
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, be sure to, again, leave those comments. Be sure to like, share, subscribe if you haven't. Hit the little bell down below so you can see when we post videos. You get notifications on that. And yeah, any final thoughts before I close this out, gentlemen?
No, but I think the Cypher Core book is awesome so far. I'm really excited to see what our final thoughts are going to be.
Just rubbing it in Dean's face. Sorry, just had to.
Oh, hold on, I didn't get mine. Let's rub it at the same time.
There we go. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. Dean, any last words after we rub our success in your face a little? I guess Dean is at a loss for words. But yeah.
I should have mine by the next video.
And yeah, this has been a fantastic talk. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to check the description for the especially for the rules primer. If you don't know or don't have the Cypher book, it'd be a great way to learn about it. And yeah, from us at the CU, we will see you later.